All right. So yeah, I mean, I heard you talking to the other guy about a bunch of the different topics. I just had a bunch to say about all of them. I messaged you and I said debating if Palpatine or the Empire, Sith were the good guys or not.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy to go off of whatever you wanted to talk
Well,
about.
I want to see if you got an argument against this.
Well, I think it's pretty easy to say that the Sith aren't the good guys. The
Well,
Empire would be harder for me to argue against, but I think that you could argue pretty firmly that the Sith weren't the good guys.
okay. What's the case for? Well, when I say the Sith, I'm talking specifically about Vader
Believe.
and Palpatine.
Okay, so you're not talking about the Sith as a whole. You're talking about two Sith in particular.
Yeah. Well, and the Sith pre Rule of Two, I would say also weren't bad guys. And I'm not even sure that post Rule of Two. In fact, now that I think about it, no, I can make the case that the Jedi were worse than the Sith. That the Jedi weren't the
Okay,
good
well,
guys.
are we gonna argue that which one was worse or which one was good or bad?
Well, the who were the good guys in that scenario? You can say they're both
I
bad,
would.
but one's taking the side of the good guy, one's taking the side of the bad guy, right?
I see. Yeah. I mean, I would still make the case that the Jedi are always going to be the good guys,
Why?
just based off of the core beliefs of the Jedi. I mean, they can be corrupted. Like a Jedi can be corrupted,
Their core beliefs are
twisted.
worse.
Well, okay, stick with me for a second. I think that if you look at the Jedi's beliefs, they're pure. They're almost purely good, unless they're corrupted by the person wielding them.
What's wrong with the
Whereas the
Sith
Sith are
beliefs? They're not purely or there's nothing wrong with their beliefs. What's wrong with them?
most of the Sith's beliefs are totally reliant on like the power drain of the individual, like the host. So the
Wait,
person becomes
what?
uglier. They become more cynical of
No, they
everything.
don't. That is not true.
What would you say? What makes you say that that's not true?
They don't become uglier because they're Sith. Did Palpatine become uglier because he was Sith? He was marred by Force
Of course you
lightning.
did.
No, he was marred by Force
No.
lightning.
No, so I mean, I have heard people say that, and I think that is what Palpatine wants you to think in the Star Wars canon, but I think the actual, like, in-universe explanation is that that's his true form, and that he kind of, like, loses that in the moment, and then it's just revealed, so he just keeps it. I mean,
There
he
were
uses that
really
as a
good-looking Sith, dude.
sure.
Like the
Yeah, I
dark
mean, but
side
see, like,
itself does not make you ugly. But even if it did, let's
not
just grant for a second that it does. That you, by being a dark side force user, get uglier. That doesn't mean it's evil even then. Just because it
you
makes you
wouldn't say that
ugly,
something that's draining you of your own, like, your youth, your purity, your power. You wouldn't
they
say
live
that that's
longer. Not they don't live shorter lives, they live longer lives.
I'm pretty sure that they only live based off of, like, the ritual of taking from others, like Darth Nihilus, where he had to, like, consume planets,
No,
you know
that
what I mean?
way
And
no,
initiate
no,
also had to
no.
consume souls,
Neelis
you know what I mean?
yeah, Neelis did that, but the other Sith Lord did not do that. And Revan, who was a Sith Lord, did not do that. And Malik, who was
Well,
a Sith
Revan is
Lord,
only a
did not
Sith.
do that.
Revan is only well, Malik as well. They were only Sith through mind control. They weren't Sith because they turned. They
Yeah,
they got into a scuffle with Vitiate, and
whose
then
life
Revan
force
never
was
made it out.
Kreia draining?
Say that again.
Whose life force was Kreia draining? She was definitely a Sith Lord.
I mean, well, so it's not that her own life force is being drained. Do you know what I mean? Like in
She lived
Knights of the
forever,
Old
dude.
Republic,
She was ancient. Palpatine was ancient. They weren't the dark side wasn't making them uh taking their vitality away from them. They were getting
well, hold on.
unnaturally long lives.
I think using the argument that they live a long time isn't necessarily like I don't think that's a good argument because all Force users will live way past their normal life
Yeah, so
expectancy.
then
Like if
why
they're
would you
really,
use that as an argument that they were evil then?
well, I said that it distorted their physical look. I didn't say they died earlier.
Okay, but isn't it the case that even if it was the case that they got uglier because they used the dark side, how would that entail evil because they get uglier?
Corruption of the host. And so
That's
I
not
think the
proof
reason
of
that you could
corruption.
blame it
That's
on the
not proof of corruption.
well, sure it is because sorry, because like prior to them adopting the way of the Sith, they looked completely different. They acted completely different.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
that's
so
only one of
what?
my reasons why I think that
So
they're
yeah,
bad.
but so
They all
what?
claim to.
Yeah, like that because they act differently and they're from your perspective ugly. That means evil.
I mean,
That
I
that
think
doesn't
that.
follow, bro.
Well, I mean, no. So
Like
look,
if
it's
I
not
get
just my
acid
own
thrown on my
perception of
face, am
evil.
I
Like
now
they're
eviler? It's-
no, it's not my own perception of evil. It's the universe is repulsed by them. I mean, they would even categorize them as evil in the Star Wars universe, which is why they're constantly in hiding. Which is
yeah,
why they
I
have
get I
to.
get that they're categorized that way
Yeah.
as as being evil, but that's narrative building. They just claim that they're evil. They don't demonstrate that they're evil. And remember, Anakin Skywalker says to Obi-Wan Kenobi in the third episode, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil.
Yeah, but we know Anakin to be completely lost at that point.
How
Like
was he?
he's crying in the scene before that. Like, I mean, yeah,
Well,
he's
yeah,
hyper
he was.
emotional. He wants R2 to stay with the ship so
Well,
R2 doesn't
well,
see what he's gonna do.
yeah, of course, because he had seen the Jedi try to assassinate the duly elected Chancellor of the Republic, and he felt betrayed by them. So yeah, he was a little confused. That would be very confusing if you saw everybody that you love try to assassinate your mentor. You probably wouldn't like that very much.
Well, was it that, or do you think it was the fact that he was holding on to his mom dying? I mean, he blames the
And
Jedi
whose fault was
exclusively
that?
for his
The Jedi who
not the
refused?
Jedi's.
They absolutely refused. They took this slave kid away from mom, and then none of them bothered to go back and get her out of slavery. This is the
I
benevolent
mean,
order of the Jedi. They take the slave kid, and then what? They had how many? 16 years, and they just never bothered to go back and get Mama. That sounds like a
so none
really
of these
bad
other
idea,
kids.
bro.
You don't think that any of these other kids that they take in to be Jedi have parents that are like living horrible lives that they would need to be saved from?
Well, if the whole point is to distance yourself from emotional entanglements, then wouldn't the Jedi go out of their way in order to put the kid's mind at ease by at least rescuing the slave mom?
No, because then that would be reinforcing the thought that you need to give into these emotions. Only then you can only have peace once you've given into the emotion that you know everything's totally
Well,
okay.
that's
No, no, no,
stupid.
no. You need to have
That's like
peace.
leaving meth in the room of a meth addict and then going, "Why did you smoke that?"
Well, not necessarily. I mean, no,
Yeah,
I don't think
necessarily.
that's a good argument. I don't think they match up.
Yeah, they match up.
Like,
All Anakin Skywalker was thinking about was that his mom was a slave somewhere else. How was that helpful to
oh,
him?
okay. You're right with that, but this is also the argument that Yoda makes. And so I don't think that they're evil by taking him. I think that it was just the circumstances. But that doesn't mean that they now need to right all the wrongs of Anakin's life to like make him into this perfect person. Obi-Wan has all this has very similar problems, which is why Obi-Wan feels so
What
compelled to be
problems?
like his brother to him. What?
What problems did Obi-Wan have? His family wasn't a bunch of slaves on a desert planet.
No, no, his family wasn't slaves, but his brother was. I mean, like he has like that love entanglement that they write into the story later. George Lucas does. So I mean, and that's also why I don't think that Anakin
And
needs
by
to
the way, the
have all of
Jedi
his.
not allowing marriage was a prime problem when it came to these. And by the way, telling people not to have relationships and to not have any sort of emotional entanglements was one of their biggest weaknesses. There was no
I
goodness
agree, it was
there.
one of their weaknesses, but if you look at what they're trying to do, it almost kind of makes sense
How does it make sense?
because so I don't have any concrete evidence to support what I'm about to say, but it seems as if they were trying to learn from the old republic because the old republic was a lot more chaotic. Like people could get married. They had like dudes had like harems of Jedi chicks that they would walk around with. I think even in the Republic Commando books, there's still at the time of the Republic like these like fragments of Jedi orders where they're like all each other and stuff. So I think that they were doing that
I don't
to
think
try
you
to
have to
just like
have
reestablish some
you
order.
don't have to
You
have
know what I mean?
degeneracy or no marriage. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be like,
I
"Oh,
hear
we're
you.
all fornicating and having big orgies or we just can't have sex ever or have any sort of emotional entanglement." That's insane.
Well, it seems like in the Star Wars universe, they chop it up to like emotion or no emotion. They don't really have
Yeah, I
balance here.
agree. I agree
You're
that they
probably destroying the
assert
reason why.
that through the Jedi code that somehow made them good, and through the Sith code it somehow made. That's an assertion, though. I don't see the demonstration of that.
No, I'm not even talking about the code. I'm talking about the effect that the Sith has on the person that is like believing in the Sith. You know?
What?
And like they
What?
encourage
What
passion, but they
effect?
don't encourage positive passion.
Yes, they do encourage positive passion.
What positive passion do they encourage?
They're saying that through your emotional control. Read the Sith, the tenets of the Sith out loud. It's all just saying that through the emotional control and emotional regulation, you can achieve the things that you want. In this case, power. Which power, achieving power is not evil.
I believe at the end it says that all your chains will be broken free, right?
Yeah. How's that evil?
Well, it's kind of telling you to throw everything away.
It's not telling you to throw
I
everything
don't.
away. It's saying that you will be freed from this idea of non-emotional entanglements by harnessing your emotions to achieve your goals. So they're controlling their emotions just as much as the Jedi are. They're just actually utilizing them for the achievement of goals.
No, no. I'm going to stick with my argument here. It's not positive passion. It just isn't because if
What's
you look at the
positive
way
passion?
that positive passion would be something like the love you feel like on a first date
Yeah,
or
but
something
love
like
is
that.
just as corrupting as hatred, right? It can be just as corrupting.
Over time, sure, but not like initially. I think the
Even
love you feel or like
initially, doesn't love lead to obsession? Doesn't love lead
not
to all
always.
sorts of negative connotations? Well, neither does anger. Anger doesn't always lead to X either, right? Anger doesn't, just because you're angry, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to manifest that in a destructive way. And just because you utilize love, that doesn't mean that that's going to be reinforced in a constructive way, right?
Right, but when we're talking about the encouragement, right? Like we're not talking about just the thing in itself existing by itself. We're talking about someone encouraging something. So someone encouraging love to you is different than someone encouraging like anger or just
It
like
depends on the purpose. If you're a boxer and you're being encouraged to be angrier in the ring, wouldn't that be a good thing?
not all. No, I don't. I
Do you
actually
think that
don't
if
think
you
so.
were a
I think
boxer
that
and
you
you
would
were
get more
encouraged to be
pleasure.
loving in the ring, that that would be a good thing?
No, I don't think that they're
No.
encouraged to be loving, but I think that you would have more
But hang on,
coaches and
why is it
boxers
that a
telling you that it's
boxer, hang on, why is it that a boxer would not be encouraged to be loving towards the person he's boxing in the ring? Why?
because it would deviate from the goal.
Right, it deviates from the goal. So what we've established here is that we can utilize anger and your passions in order to achieve some goals easier than others, and we can use love uh, and entangle love in something, and it can be not constructive, right? So you've just demarcated a case in which anger is better than love for achieving a goal. Good job, man.
No, I did not.
You did
Not even
too.
close.
You
Not
did
even close.
too.
You walked me through it, and you were close. I almost bought it, but
You,
I got
dude, what
scared
do
at
you
the last
mean? You
second. I
can't
backed out.
backtrack now, dude. That was the L. You took the L on this one, bro.
No, 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 no. No.
Yes,
So
you did,
look,
dude. Yes, you did.
look. No, you have to. No, no, no. You got me on the talking because it's a little late, and I didn't expect
Oh, that's
the thoughts
cope. Why
coming
are
up.
you coping, dude? That's cope. You're
There's a
coping.
little bit of cope laced in there. A
Yeah,
little
a
bit of
little bit of
cope laced
cope.
in
A
there.
little bit of
But
cope.
I think what I'm saying, I think it has like so it stands on its own 2 feet. You know what I mean? Like when you're encouraging bad towards to poke someone, like if someone's in a vulnerable state and you're encouraging even anger, right? Like
But if they're in
if
a
someone's in a
vulnerable state
vulnerable
and you
state,
encourage it, hang on. If they're in a vulnerable
no.
state, love can also be just as damaging, right?
Well, sure, but that's why the Jedi don't encourage any of it. That's why they encourage balance before they tell you to take anything on. They tell you should have balance.
Yeah, but
You know what I
also
mean?
balance itself can be used very destructively. Sometimes it's not the time or place for balance, but it's a time and place for action, right? This was the argument that Revan made before he went off and joined the Mandalorian Wars, right?
And then he got corrupted. It literally led to his downfall.
But it also led to the salvation of the galaxy because the Jedi were not wise enough to see all ends, were they?
No, it did lead to the salvation of the galaxy.
Yes, it
I think
did.
it led to like 250 years of the galaxy getting.
No, it led to the salvation of the
Uh,
galaxy, is what it led
in
to.
what? What do you mean?
So
I might be forgetting something.
yeah,
Enlighten me.
so Revan was able to essentially destroy the Star Forge, which if that had fallen into the wrong hands would have destroyed the galaxy.
Oh, you're talking about after the Knights of the Old Republic. I'm thinking about how he becomes Darth Revan. So I see what you're
So it
talking
is
about,
the
but that doesn't
case.
even
So
last
hang on.
long
So it
because
is the
Bastila
case.
gets
Hang
taken,
on.
and that's
So it
because
is
of
the
him.
case that the Jedi with the best of intentions, who would have stopped Revan from going off and fighting in the Mandalorian Wars because they weren't smart enough, to see all ends, they weren't wise enough to see all ends, that they actually, if they had stopped that, it would have led to the destruction of the galaxy, right?
Okay, but remind me what this has to do with what we were talking about with encouragement
Because
of.
just because they want to find balance, their ways aren't always the right ways. Their ways would have led to galactic destruction, whereas Revan's key point to action actually led to galactic salvation.